Have you ever checked to see if your wedges actually fit into the existing set of irons you're playing? We go out and we pick up wedge after wedge after wedge, we stick them in the bag, and do we ever check the length and the swing weight? So length and swing weight are two things we have to make sure that actually fit into our set to give us the best incremental distance control, the best feel of our wedges, and the best accuracy on our wedges. So right now I've got a 4-through pitching wedge here, and this is something you can do. If you have a nice straight edge table somewhere in your house or wherever, go ahead and lay out your irons. As you can see on the other end of this table, I've got the ferrules right up against the edge of the table. So that tells me the incremental lengths that I can look at from my 4-through pitching wedge. Well, here I've got a 1/2 inch from the 4 to the 5, 1/2 inch down, 1/2 inch down, 1/2 inch down, 1/2 inch down from the 9 to the pitch. Now I also have 3 wedges sitting over here. And I have a gap wedge, a sand wedge, and a 60-degree lob wedge. And I want to check their lengths. A lot of times you'll see the lengths are the same or even longer than your pitching wedge. Not a good situation. What we really want to do, and this is the way I recommend you look at it, we want the pitching wedge to the gap wedge to be a 1/2 inch difference. We want the gap wedge to the sand wedge to be another 1/2 inch difference. So the sand wedge is a 1/2 inch shorter than the gap. Then we want, if we have a gap wedge, we really then want our 60-degree lob wedge to be the same length as the sand. We just don't want to get too short, which we can. But here's a situation. Let's say that we take the gap wedge out of our set simply because we want to put in a hybrid or something else, and we want to be able to get a little bit better scoring than maybe the gap wedge is helping us with. Gap wedges have been created because the manufacturers have done the dumbest thing, in my opinion, in over the last number of years of strengthening lofts so far down that we now have a 48-degree pitching wedge and a 56-degree sand wedge. That's 8 degrees difference in those two clubs. That's why we have a gap wedge. But if you want to get rid of your gap wedge, you can take your pitching wedge and just learn to hit it 3/4 to 7/8 shots, and it's not a difficult shot to learn, and that way you don't need a gap wedge. A lot of players don't use gap wedges, a lot of good players, a lot of them do, so it's all up to you. So anyway, if I don't have a gap wedge, what do I do now on length? Well, I want to make my sand wedge a 1/2 inch longer because I want it a 1/2 inch shorter than my pitching wedge. So now my pitching wedge to sand wedge is a 1/2 inch shorter, then sand wedge to lob wedge is a 1/2 inch shorter. Now I can make my lob shorter than my sand because I don't have a gap. So you want them now going right down in perfect increments. As far as swing weights, let's assume these irons are D2. If these irons are D2, I want my pitching wedge and my gap wedge, if I have one, to be 2 or 3 swing weights heavier than the rest of the irons in my set. So I want them to be D4 or D5, somewhere in that range. Some people like them a little heavier, but that's good. I want my sand club to be 4 to 6 swing weights heavier, so a D6 to D8, and I also like my lob wedge to be 4 to 6 swing weights heavier, which is D6 to D8. It's all personal preference. Some guys like wedges getting up into the EO, E1, stuff like that, and if you do, that's fine. But check the swing weights on your wedges, check the incremental lengths, and make sure that your wedges actually fit into your set of irons.